Hey everyone, it's Wingspan TT, the fourth best commentator on YouTube, and today I'm going to be answering a very common request, and one of the most common requests I get on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever, is Wingspan, Chance, however you should call me. Can you show me how to fit a stealth bomber? Can you make a video about how to fit a stealth bomber? And I've been putting this off for some time for two reasons. One is because I don't spend a lot of time in high sec, so I just haven't been in a good position. Like, I don't lose bombers super frequently, although it seems I lose Stratioses the second I undock them. The second reason is because I have been working on a stealth bomber strategy guide called Torpedo Delivery, which will be posted soon, depending when you see this video, at torpedodelivery.com in the guide section there. So I will be covering a lot of the stuff more in depth in the actual guide. It's more of a written guide with a couple, illustrations and things like that to go in it. But in the meantime, I just want to talk about some of the basics of fitting a stealth bomber. I'm going to start with the Nemesis here because it's a very popular stealth bomber. It's what I'm most familiar with, and I think it's a good base to start at. While I can technically fly Purifier, and we see one here, I'm going to start with the Nemesis. So let's pull up the fitting window, and you'll see here I have a completely clean Nemesis. And I will point out, by the way, and people have asked me this in videos too, how do you fit certain things? I don't understand how your fit works. I do have some implants. I have a small, I believe 2 or 3% CPU implant, and I have a couple missile-based implants to increase missile damage. So if you see my DPS slightly higher than yours, or the CPU slightly higher than yours, and even if you have perfect skills or something like that, that could be the reason why. And of course, if you have a higher amount, then of course you might have perfect skills. I certainly do not have perfect skills. There's still a couple skills that I haven't worked up to have. So let's talk about the first things first. What are the absolutely required things you need to have on a stealth bomber? What are the things that are not optional in any way, shape, or form? Well, the most, I guess the least optional thing is covert ops cloaking device. It's called a stealth bomber for a reason. And this is the stealth part, the actual being cloaked. If you cannot fit this for whatever reason, you can't fit a covert ops cloak, you should not be flying a stealth bomber. I mean, otherwise, yes, if you want to fly some little missile frigate that can't be cloaked, that's fine. Go fly a missile frigate, but this is what it's good at. Of course, the being invisible part for the discrete torpedo delivery. As far as the bomber part goes, I don't actually believe that the bombs are required, and that is going to be a caveat for this little fitting video, is that all the fitting I'm going to be talking about is going to be fitting that works around torpedo delivery. That's about solo wormhole operations, the kind of solo and small gang work that you see me do in my videos, that you can go out and do. If you're going to be doing bombing runs, you're going to be doing large fleet operations, you're going to be operating in nullsec primarily, whereas I primarily operate in wormhole space and lowsec, then you can kind of ignore some of the fitting advice that I'll be talking about today, but this is where I'll be starting. So yes, covert ops cloaking device, most important thing. Then of course, directly after that is the torpedo launchers. You need torpedo launchers, and we're going to get in discussion a little bit later about Tech 1 versus Tech 2, but for the most part, for people who are starting out, the main thing you want to do is have Tech 1 launchers, and in this case I'm using the Arbalest launchers. They're metaphors. Now of course, oh god damn it. And the reason I'm spacing them out like this is for overheat reasons, because when you overheat your modules, they heat the modules next to them. So if you have them all next to each other, they're more likely to overheat each other and then burn out faster, whereas if you spread them out, then that heat gets dissipated a bit. So these are like absolutely necessary modules. You need your torpedo launchers to fire your torpedoes, and you need a cloaking device. And from here, there's definitely going to be stuff that's still required, okay, but this is what I always fit first. Now, the next thing I would actually fit first, not first actually, the next thing that I would fit is going to be the stuff that increases your damage. And just so I have some frame of reference, by the way, I'm going to drag some Caldari Navy Inferno torpedoes in here. And these should be the torpedoes you're using 95% of the time. Even if you have T2 launchers, these are the best torpedoes. I mean, Dread Garistas torpedoes are technically better, but they're never for sale, and when they are, they're ridiculously expensive. So I would personally buy them if I could find them. I just can't find them for sale anywhere. And you see here, my DPS with absolutely no damage mods, 331 DPS. So now typically what I'd like to do is fit ballistic control systems. And the reason is because they take up a lot of CPU, and they're basically mandatory, especially if you're new. And what these do is they increase the damage and the fire rate of your torpedo launchers. And we see here that my DPS, turning them off from 331 DPS going all the way up to 486. So that's like an increase of 150 starting at 33. So that's an increase of like almost, I want to say 50% damage just having these two things on. And you can see immediately why I want to put them on first, because it's such a huge impact on damage. Like even if I didn't fit any other damage mods or do anything else to increase my damage at this point, this is a completely acceptable setup. And if you're wondering how much damage do you need to do, there's no real number you need to do, but I would say, you know, with overheat, you minimum want to do like around 400. Like if you're doing less than 400, especially overheated, you're probably not going to be super effective. Obviously, this is cold without overheat, so this will go up another 20% as is. It would be around 600 damage like this, okay? But I fit the BCSs in, and now we see my CPU is at 118 out of 400 left. And power grid's really not going to come into an issue here because I don't really fit a lot of things that require power grid, and we'll get into it in a second. So the next thing that I think you should fit, that I personally say that you should fit, in here, I'm going to drag it in here, is some kind of missile rigs. If you're going to have any kind of missile rigs, you want to fit this next. And here's why. Because they have a large impact on the amount of CPU you use. So if you fit one, you can immediately see what impact it has on your CPU. But if you fit two at a time, you could screw yourself over. If you fit these first, and then you fit on this other stuff, you can find out you're out of CPU, and now you have to destroy a rig, which kind of sucks because you just spend money on them. These are about 10 million each. And these are tier 2 rigs. Keep in mind that there are tier 1 rigs that cost less. They're less effective, but they have the same penalty. So if you can afford to use the T2s, in 90% cases you want to use the T2s. And keep in mind also that with the latest expansion, not the latest expansion, but the expansion from the summer, you no longer require skills to fit rigs. So even though it may say that you have a requirement of launch rigging 4, that is actually not true. You can fit them regardless of your skill level. It's just that the skill level will decrease the drawback on this, in this case, CPU load. So here I'm going to take the small warhead rigger catalyst and drop it on here. And I'm going to say this too, if you're wondering how come you didn't put all the other catalysts or loading bay, launcher, all that crap. Okay, here's the thing. If you don't know too much about torpedoes, they have an attribute here, explosion radius. And the default explosion radius for torpedoes is 450 meters, okay? That means that they only do full damage to anything that has a signature radius of 450 meters or larger. Now by having this rig on, and yes I also have some skills and implants that lower this a little bit, I'm able to get it down to 288. That means I can apply full damage to anything that has a signature radius of 288 or larger, and of course I'm going to have target painters too. Now hold on a second, now I'm just going to throw some money away. But now watch this, I'm going to look at this here. Without that, it's up to 360 meters. So now this is like a battle cruiser level, whereas before when it was at 280, that's more like a large industrial, medium industrial kind of level. So the rigger catalyst goes a really long way, and as a general rule of thumb, I believe that every single stealth bomber should have 2 to 3 mods that affect signature radius to explosion radius, that ratio. So in this case, it's going to be a rigger catalyst. Now, what else can we do to affect that? I'm going to bring in here Extron. Do I have any of this? No, I don't actually have any target painters. Jeez. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? Let me pull this in here. Phased, weapon, navigation. I'll just buy some real quick. I'll just buy 4 because you never know. Might need some. Extron. Okay, so these are target painters. Every stealth bomber pilot should be intimately familiar with target painters. But if you're not familiar, basically what they're going to do is they're going to increase the signature radius of your target by 30%, and then an additional 20% if overheated. And of course, your skills also affect this. So for me, they increase it about like 40% or so when they're being used. So let me just go ahead right now and no, I'm not going to drop one of these in first. Actually, what I wanted to put in first is a warp disruptor. Now here's the other thing with warp disruptors. And I'm just trying to decide if I want, and I'm trying to actually show off the difference here between T1 and T2. If you're trying to figure out should I use a T1 or T2 warp disruptor, this is why I put all those other CPU things first, right? Because T2 is definitely way better. It has a significantly larger range, 24 kilometers compared to 20 kilometers of a normal disruptor, but definitely uses way more CPU, about, I believe, 12 more CPU or something like that. So we see here 77 versus 65 remaining on my ship. we can see there's a relatively big difference. So let's go back for a second. I'm going to drop on the 2 target painters. And some people are going to say that 2 target painters are overkill, but keep this in mind. If I have 2 target painters on, okay, and they each give a 36% signature radius bonus, that's 42% or something overheated. That means if I apply both of these to a target, I can double its signature radius. Now, if I compare now, in addition with the rigor catalyst, okay, that means that since I just need to hit something that's 280 signature radius or larger, that means because I can double the signature radius of anything, I can apply full damage to anything with a signature radius of 140. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong stat here. Down here, 140 meters or larger, which instead of, just think about that. Think about how big a difference that is. That is now I can hit a lot of cruisers, whereas before I can only hit battle cruisers and battleships and higher. That's a really big difference, and that's where you see the 3 mods here. So now what I'm going to do is, I still have the space. I'm going to drop in a warp disruptor 2 because I have the CPU space. I still have 33 CPU left, so at this point I can choose, do I want to do an afterburner or a micro warp drive? And you know, I would even say it's not even strictly necessary. You do not have to have a prop mod in a stealth bomber if you're doing the kind of stuff I'm doing. It's definitely helpful. Micro warp drive can get you out of a lot of sticky situations. Here we go. I'm going to drop in a micro warp drive in this instance. And again, it depends on your skills and things like that. This can get you through gatecamps. This can help you slow boat through space if you're setting up anything really. If you're setting up bookmarks or anything like that. It's less useful in actual fights depending on what it is, but it also means that you can get away really fast if you need to. You can get out like 3,000 meters a second with overheat, which is very useful. Of course, it can be taken down by scrams, but usually if you're scrams, you're already dead. If you're scrammed, you're usually dead in a bomber. So micro warp drive is what I actually prefer. Now we see I have 10 CPU left. So at this point I can fit a probe launcher. And here we go. So I'm going to fit a probe launcher. You see a core probe launcher is actually not going to fit. So there's 2 options here. One is you could throw on the probe launcher and have it offline, and this is totally acceptable because you're not using your probe launcher all the time. You're only using it when you first get into a system, okay? Or you're using it when you've been camping in a system overnight or something like that, and you're scanning something down. So you have your probe launcher on most of the time. Usually what I do is turn off 1 target painter on this, okay? Because you don't even know if you need 2 target painters sometimes. I do the scanning, then I turn this thing off, I turn this thing on, and I cloak. And that's it. So you have the thing scanned, whatever. Now if you want to get fancy, of course, you can go get a Sisters Core probe launcher. Okay, here we go. Sisters Core probe launcher uses less CPU, and we see here actually 0.4 CPU, fitting absolutely nicely. And then of course, oh, I don't have scan probes either. Wow, what the hell's wrong with me? Sisters Core scanner probes, and we buy some probes. And I like to have 16 at a time. That way I can kind of reload more easily. And of course the other thing is that the Sisters probes have better scan strength. So now we see here 486 DPS cold, so about 600 DPS hot. And we still have 1 empty rig slot here, and now you can do whatever you want with this slot. So what some people are going to do, if you fit your ship the way I have here, what you could do is drop a, let me pull one of these up here, a polycarbon rig. Small polycarbon engine housing. In this case I'll pull a T2. Oops, that was a T1. I was going to say, that was a really good price considering it was T2. And what this will do is you'll see here my speed 344 whatever. I'm going to bump this up. It's also going to improve my agility, so now my ship is faster. Now we have a nicely fit ship. Oops, that was not intentional. Of course, if you don't have the CPU to fit it how I fit it here, you could always just put in a CPU mod instead of what I just put in. Instead of polycarbon, you could put in a CPU mod. And there we go. We have a fitted ship. And this is definitely a very good, this is what I would say be a very good starter fit. And again, if you cannot fit this stuff, you can replace these T2s with T1s. You can replace this with a CPU mod. You can replace this with a T1. You can replace this with an afterburner. If you don't have the money, you can replace this with a core probe launcher. If you don't have the CPU, you can turn it offline. Totally legit. Now let me pull up. Now what I'll do is I'm going to put together the fit that I've been using and show you some key differences. Alright, let's look at this a little bit differently. So this time what I'm going to do is pull in my covert ops cloaking device here. Very good. And now what I'm actually going to do is bring in polarized torpedo launchers. These are the new torpedo launchers. They run for about, well, they just cost me about 150 million each. But I'm going to pull these on. What they do is they fire 20% faster, they hold 300% more torpedoes, and they lower my resist, you'll see, down to 0. So my effective resistance is about half of what it normally would be. I'm sorry, not my resistance, but my total hit points. Polarized torps. So now we're going to throw torpedoes in here. And just to compare, real quick, if I throw in Caldari Navy Inferno torpedoes with absolutely no other mods in here, you'll see I'm already at 440 DPS. That's absolutely ridiculous, okay? So this is just a comparison using the exact same torpedoes, okay? Now we're going to throw in ballistic control things, but I bought Caldari Navy ballistic control systems because they do more damage than the T2s. Why is it not fitting? Go on. The item is being transferred. Okay, great. I feel like I'm lagging out. And I got lagged out. Okay, so let's say I drop in the Caldari Navy ballistic control systems. These are slightly better than the normal T2 ballistic control systems.
There is already something in that location.
Okay, great. And now with 2 of these in, I still have 132 CPU spare, and now we see I have 675 DPS. Now let's see here, warhead, nope, loading bay. Bay accelerators, that's what I was going to do. Now, just to push this totally over the edge, just to see completely insane, this is not what a sane person would do. There, I used a 300. Oh, I had to use a, oops, hold on a second. Okay, that's not really ideal. We're going to destroy that thing. Okay, we're going to get a loading bay accelerator 1, and then we're going to get a califaction catalyst 1. And now with these mods of polarized, cold, damage 757 DPS. That means overheated, I would pull in probably 900 damage per second to targets with a, now of course this is not ideal here, with a signature radius of 360 meters or larger. Now I know what you're thinking. Wingspan, what happens if you use rage torpedoes? Rage torpedoes are so much better. Well, keep in mind, rage torpedoes are great at damage, but the explosion radius is 774 meters, so if they can only apply their damage to gigantic things or things that have been target painted up the wazoo, things that have been painted more than a Parisian whore. Alright, so an Inferno rage torpedo dropping these things on, you're going to see some very pretty numbers coming up. Oh, what? No, that wasn't even enough. That was not a pretty number. Because I didn't have enough goddamn torpedoes. There we go. We got a whole ton of rage torpedoes. And now we see the damage at 890 DPS cold. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think it would be insane to say that overheated, this would do about 1100, maybe, yeah, 1100 damage per second with this setup. Now, once again, keep in mind that this is only to targets that have extremely large signature radius. But you see now that it's equipped down to 619 meters. That means I could, with 2 target painters, hit things with a signature radius of about 300 meters. So battle cruisers and up. This is deadly. And this is what I like about T2 launchers, is that you have the option. So 90% of the time, these rage torpedoes are going to be useless, right? But what I can do is, I could take the Caldari Navy Inferno torpedoes, I could throw those on my ship, okay? Once they decide that they're going to actually load. Here we go. Okay, and mind you, it's 60 at a time, so you never have to reload. Instead of having 18 or 20 like the other launchers, the polarized ones fit 60 each. That's 180 total. That's absolutely nuts. Now, I don't expect everyone is actually going to use polarized. You could definitely have T2 launchers here, be doing slightly less damage, of course, than this, while still having the flexibility here. Polarized launchers also use a little less CPU than normal. So then what I would do is I would take the rage torpedoes. I would take, you know, one whole set of them, 180. I'll put them in my cargo hold so I can switch to them. I'd also go here and take javelin torpedoes, take 180 of these things, and throw them in my cargo hold too. That way, if I'm flying around, I decided I need javelin torpedoes or rage torpedoes, I can switch them. But again, 90% of the time, I'm going to be using the Caldari Navy torpedoes. Okay, and now from here I can fit the rest of the ship. And you know, I've already spent, and again, this is really not ideal. I really don't want to use this kind of setup here. Here we go. Yes. These rigs are not ideal. So what I am going to do is I'm going to pull in a rigger. Oh, oops. Hold on a second. Item hanger. I'm going to pull in a rigger catalyst. And I can't type. And I already used my rigger catalyst, so that's out the window. Hold on a second. Rigger catalyst. They should create a company or something, a shipyard in the game called Rigger, and then that company can create catalysts, and they'll be called Rigger Catalyst. And of course, I put the cart before the horse here a little bit. The Rigger Catalyst going in here, still having 122 CPU left, which is more than plenty. And you see immediately this drops down back to 288. I'm going to be dropping on the warp disruptors. Oh, faint warp disruptor. Might as well put a warp disruptor 2 at this rate. And now I'm getting fancy. Now I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could do anything like, could I buy one of these really fancy warp disruptors that, you know, has a crazy range? And let's see, if we look at all the range here, we have ones that are like friggin' 30 kilometers. Jesus. Do any of these have some other like power grid thing I don't know about? No. I see some of these are like no. But domination warp disruptor. Jesus, what the hell is this cost? 189 million. That's absolutely insane. Dark Blood, 92 million. Shadow Serpentis, 60 million. And we see here the usage, CPU usage on these is pretty damn high. But it's actually not. It's at 26, 28, True Sancha Warp Disruptor, 28. I see, 100 million. 92 million. You know what? Fuck it. Fuck it. We'll buy the 90 million one. Why not? Why not? Okay, here we go. We're putting the Dark Blood Warp Disruptor on here. Part of the reason why I want to do this, other than to just spend the money on the video, is because I have no resist. I would like to stay as far from my target as possible. So now with overheat, I could probably stay at about 33 km away. I can orbit at 30 and still hit people. We could drop in the rest of the stuff here. With the target painters, of course, there is no actual reason to use the T2s. I suppose if we looked into it, I'm sure that some of the variations of the target painters are like actually better here. Oh my god. Reset all. Oops. Have the other stuff still in here. If we actually look at the signature radius bonus and the activation cost, CPU, activation cost, where is it? There we go. We'll see here that domination provides a 33% bonus, but it uses way more CPU, and it uses way more capacitor. So in this case, I don't think the blink fit is going to be worth it. I'm just going to throw 2 of these puppies on. And then again for the last thing here, you know, I'm just going to throw in a, let's see, I got 50 CPU left. I wonder if I should actually put in another rigger catalyst. Should probably have the speed though. Should probably have the speed. Bump up the speed of the ship a little bit. For whatever reason, it didn't decide it wants to fit there. Okay, here we go. Polycarbon, 366. And we still got plenty of CPU. Now at this point, if you want to put a bomb launcher on here, you could totally put in a bomb launcher. Of course, I won't actually be fitting that. And there's definitely some other options. If you want to take out one of these target painters and put in a sensor booster. You want to take out a target painter and put in a... I don't know, a sensor dampener. Usually what most people put in here is EWAR. So you're either going to have some kind of sensor, DAMs, EWAR, ECM, something like that. You're going to have sensor booster. You could have another warp disruptor if you want to warp disrupt more than one target at a time where you suspect your targets may be stabbed, but I would generally recommend just putting that stuff in your cargo hold and then switching out with the mobile depot. Or in this case, whatever, throw in a micro warp drive. Micro warp drive. And it's my understanding, by the way, that micro warp drive 2 kind of sucks. Throw the limited micro warp drive on there. And finally, I'm going to throw in a Sisters Core probe launcher. At this point, I've spent enough money on the ship. I don't even want to think about the cost. 300, 400, 500 million. This is like an almost billion-isk bomber. But hey, if someone's ever going to get my bounty of 1.1 billion-isk, I'm going to need to start flying more expensive ships. That's just the way it has to go. And of course, you know, I don't want anyone to look at my, I know someone's going to be looking at my ship when I die and be like, this guy fit all these expensive modules and then cheaped out on the probe launcher. Like, I don't want people to think I'm cheap, you know? Never be able to live with myself. and that's it. Then from there you can of course have a mobile depot, you can throw stuff in your ship, you can have some nanite paste, stuff like this. But this right here is a very solid fit with the polarized, again hitting about 850 DPS hot, and of course switching over to rage hitting about 1100 DPS, with the actual volleys being about 4,500, maybe just shy of 5,000. And this is how I fit a stealth bomber. So I want to show the two extremes, how you can fit one from complete start, what to do if you've never fit one before, where you should start. Always starting, of course, with the cloak, the launchers, and then your damage stuff, moving then into signature bonuses, whether they're your target painters or your rigor catalyst or anything like that, and then all the other mods kind of deciding from there what to do based on your budget and how much CPU you have left and your skills and stuff like that. But hey, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about your fit, definitely check out my guide at torpedodelivery.com. The guide will be coming out soon if it hasn't already by the time you've watched this video. You can always shoot me any questions. I'll try to help if I can. Or you can drop by our public channel in the game, Wing-DS. That's Wing-DS for Wingspan Delivery Services. If I can't help you, if I'm not there, one of my court mates will certainly oblige. In the meantime, I guess you should be hunting me down, because you could be getting a lot of ISK for shooting me out of space right now while I'm flying this bomb around. Until that happens, I guess until you shoot me down. Cheers.